I'm Susan Walker, 53 years old, and I've lived what most people might call a picture-perfect life. Married for over 30 years to Michael, a successful businessman. We have a beautiful house in a quiet suburban neighborhood. Our children have grown up and moved out, leaving me with an empty nest and a lot of time to reflect. From the outside, it looks like I have everything anyone could ask for: a stable marriage, financial security, a lovely home. But in reality, I felt a deep loneliness for years. Michael's work demands keep him away from home most of the time, traveling for weeks on end. The first few years of our marriage were filled with passion and excitement, but now the spark is long gone. We've become like business partners, sharing responsibilities but living separate emotional lives. I fill my days with errands, household chores, and the occasional coffee date with friends. I've settled into a routine that feels safe but lacks joy. One bright, sunny morning, I headed to the local grocery store, my usual Thursday ritual. I enjoy grocery shopping because it's one of the few moments when I can escape the monotony of home. As I pushed my cart through the aisles, I noticed a young man standing by the fruit section. He had an easy confidence about him, casually tossing an apple in his hand. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with dark, wavy hair and a smile that could light up a room. Our eyes met briefly, and he flashed me a grin so genuine it took me by surprise. I felt an unexpected flutter in my chest, something I hadn't felt in years. I quickly looked away, embarrassed by my reaction. But as I continued shopping, I couldn't help but glance back at him. He was talking to an elderly woman, helping her reach something from the top shelf, and the kindness in his gesture made me smile. I didn't expect anything to come of this fleeting moment, but I felt something shift inside me, like a tiny spark had been ignited. It was just a smile from a stranger, but it made me realize how starved I was for warmth and genuine connection. I finished my shopping, telling myself it was just a silly moment and nothing more. Little did I know, this was only the beginning. It didn't take long before I saw him again. A few days later, as I was reaching for a carton of milk, there he was, Nick, smiling as if he had been waiting just for me. We fell into easy conversation, like old friends reconnecting after years apart. He asked about my day, joked about my grocery choices, and somehow made the mundane feel special. Over the next few weeks, we kept bumping into each other at the store. At first, I thought it was just coincidence, but then I realized I was subconsciously timing my trips, hoping to see him. He seemed to be doing the same. One afternoon, as we both stood by the bakery section, he offered to carry my bags to my car. It was a simple gesture, but it made me feel seen in a way I hadn't felt in years. We started chatting outside the store too, standing by my car or his, talking about everything and nothing. He was funny and easygoing, with a boyish charm that made me feel light and carefree. He told me about his life, a student finishing his degree, working odd jobs to make ends meet, enjoying life without any concrete plans for the future. I told him about my kids, my garden, and bits of my life that I hadn't shared with anyone in a long time. "You seem happier lately," my friend Lisa remarked one afternoon as we sipped coffee together. I hadn't realized how much lighter I had been feeling. There was a spring in my step, a new spark in my eyes, and it was all because of Nick. One day, he asked if I wanted to grab a coffee together after our grocery run. I hesitated, feeling the invisible boundaries I was about to cross. But before I could overthink it, I agreed. We ended up at a small cafe nearby, sitting outside under the warm sun. He ordered a caramel latte, joking that it was his guilty pleasure, and I laughed at how carefree he seemed, so different from the serious men I was used to. As we sat there, chatting and laughing, I felt a joy I couldn't explain. I realized that I was looking forward to these moments with him more than anything else in my week. It was innocent enough, just two people enjoying each other's company, but it filled a void I hadn't even realized was there. He made me feel like I mattered, like I was more than just a wife or a mother. He started making small gestures that seemed insignificant but meant the world to me. He'd bring me a flower he picked on his way, or save me a seat at the cafe if he got there first. I found myself looking forward to these little moments, cherishing the way he made me feel. It was during one of these afternoons, sitting in the sun, that I caught myself staring at him, noticing the way the light hit his face, the easy smile he always had. My heart skipped a beat, and I realized with a sudden jolt that this wasn't just a friendship anymore, not for me at least. I was falling for him, and I had no idea what to do about it. Sitting across from Nick at the cafe one afternoon, I felt a strange flutter in my chest. I watched him laugh at something I said, his eyes crinkling at the corners, and I realized I hadn't felt this alive in years. The sunlight danced off his hair, and in that moment, he looked like a dream I didn't know I'd been holding on to, a glimpse of the carefree life I'd lost somewhere along the way. We talked about everything, his plans after graduation, my favorite spots in the city, even our shared love for old movies. It felt like the world had shrunk down to just the two of us, sitting there sipping coffee, oblivious to everything else. I caught myself wondering what it would be like if this wasn't just an innocent coffee date. What if there was more? What if I allowed myself to feel something deeper? It was terrifying. He was so much younger, and I knew the questions that would swirl in people's minds if they saw us together like this. What would my friends think? What would my kids say? But I couldn't ignore the way my heart raced when he looked at me, the way his voice softened when he said my name. I told myself it was just a crush, a fleeting infatuation. But as he walked me to my car and pulled me into a light, unexpected hug, I knew I was lying to myself. His touch lingered on my skin long after he let go, and as I drove home, I replayed the moment in my mind over and over again. The rational part of me knew it was absurd. I was a 53-year-old woman, old enough to be his mother. What on earth could he see in me? But another part of me, the part that had been buried under years of routine and responsibility, wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, this was real. I couldn't help but wonder, is it possible to fall in love despite the years between us? Or am I just fooling myself, clinging to a fantasy that can never become reality? Question for readers: what do you think? Is it foolish for a woman in her 50s to pursue a younger man? Or is love truly ageless if the connection is real? I spent the following days in a haze, replaying every interaction I'd had with Nick. It was ridiculous how giddy I felt, a teenage girl's crush all over again, and yet I was a grown woman, nearly twice his age. I couldn't help but smile at the thought of him, even while cooking dinner or going through paperwork. But alongside the excitement, there was a deep undercurrent of fear. What if I was misreading his kindness? Perhaps he just saw me as a friendly older woman, a mentor, someone he enjoyed spending time with but nothing more. The age difference loomed large in my mind, like a chasm that no amount of flirting could bridge. I felt like I was standing on a precipice, peering into the unknown, terrified of falling. The nights were the hardest. I'd lie awake in bed, my husband snoring gently beside me, and all I could think about was Nick. The guilt gnawed at me. This wasn't just an innocent crush anymore. I was emotionally crossing lines I'd vowed never to blur. But the truth was, my marriage had been a quiet, comfortable partnership for years now, devoid of passion. We had settled into a routine that felt safe but stifling. Nick made me feel alive again, like I was more than just a wife, more than just a mother. He made me feel seen, not as an older woman but as a woman, period. And it was exhilarating. I remember a moment in particular, standing in my kitchen, stirring a pot of soup while the afternoon sun streamed through the windows. My phone buzzed, and it was a message from Nick. Thinking of you today. Hope you're smiling. My heart skipped a beat. A simple text, yet it set off a cascade of emotions I couldn't control. I wanted to respond with something light, something casual, but my fingers hesitated on the screen. What if this was more than just a passing infatuation for both of us? What if he felt it too? The questions piled up, the fear mixing with hope in a cocktail of emotions I hadn't felt in decades. I stared out the window at the garden my husband and I had tended together for years. It was still beautiful, but the flowers seemed to pale in comparison to the wild, untamed feeling blossoming in my chest. I felt like I was standing at a crossroads, one path leading back to the life I knew, predictable, stable, safe. The other was uncharted territory, filled with the thrill of possibility, but also the risk of heartache and disgrace. I was scared, but more than that I was excited. Is it possible for a woman my age to embrace something new, something unexpected, without losing everything she's built? Or am I being reckless, letting fleeting emotions dictate my future? Question for readers: do you believe it's worth risking a stable life for a chance at real, raw happiness, even if it goes against societal expectations? Would you take the leap, or stay grounded in safety. The days passed, and the pull of my feelings for Nick became harder to ignore. Every time I saw him in the garden, or when our casual chats turned into longer, more meaningful conversations, I felt a deeper connection. It wasn't just physical. It was the way he made me feel understood. The way his laughter could light up even my darkest days. I'd never had that before, not in the way he was giving it to me now. But there was still a huge part of me that held back. The fear of crossing a line, of making things too real, was almost paralyzing. What would people say? What if my husband found out? What if I ended up hurting Nick too? I wasn't naive. I knew this could easily lead to heartbreak, and I wasn't sure I was ready to take that risk. But the more I tried to push these feelings away, the more they crept into my thoughts, into my heart. Then one afternoon, when my husband had gone away on a business trip, I found myself alone in the house with no distractions. The silence of the place, the emptiness of my marriage without him there, made me feel vulnerable in ways I hadn't realized. I walked around the house, my thoughts swirling. I needed something to break the monotony, to shake me out of this strange, restless feeling. That's when I made the decision. I would invite Nick over. Not in any overtly romantic way, not yet at least, but just to have him here, to see if this connection could translate into something deeper. I told myself it would just be a casual thing, a chance to chat more, get to know him better, without any expectations. I was lying to myself, of course. I knew deep down that the invitation was more than that. I needed to see him again, needed to see if we could cross that invisible barrier I'd put up between us. I texted him that evening. "Hi, Nick. I was wondering if you'd like to come by tomorrow afternoon. I'm making some lemonade and I thought we could talk for a while, maybe get a little more caught up. Let me know." The message felt like a test, a way of reaching out but still keeping my distance. I didn't know how he'd respond, but I had to try. The response came almost instantly. "I'd love to. See you tomorrow." There was a warmth in his words that made my heart race a little faster, and I tried not to read too much into it. But I knew deep down that something was about to shift between us. This wasn't just about lemonade anymore. As I prepared for his visit, I found myself nervous, excited, and even a little guilty. What was I doing? Was I setting myself up for disappointment? Or worse, regret? My mind was filled with 1,000 scenarios, all of them competing for space in my thoughts. But there was one undeniable truth that had taken root inside me. I wanted to see where this could go, and for the first time in years, I felt like I had something to look forward to. Something that wasn't just the quiet hum of routine. When the doorbell rang the next day, my heart skipped a beat. It was just Nick, but it felt like so much more. I took a deep breath, opened the door, and smiled at him. "Come in," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Inside, I had no idea what was going to happen next, but I knew it was going to change everything. Question for readers: how do you feel about crossing boundaries in relationships, especially when emotions run deep but the risk is high? Can something as simple as an invitation change the course of your life, or should you stay cautious and safe? Nick arrived promptly, his casual demeanor as always. I couldn't help but notice how much more striking he looked today. His warm smile, the way his eyes sparkled as he entered my home. I hadn't planned it, but I had dressed up a little, more for myself than for him. I wanted to feel good, to feel desirable again. And he made that seem possible. We sat on the couch with our lemonade, talking about everything and nothing at all. His voice was soft, yet there was a confidence in it, an ease that came from youth and freedom. I found myself laughing more than I had in a long time. His jokes weren't anything groundbreaking, but the way he delivered them made everything seem fresh. He had a way of making mundane moments feel like an adventure. As the conversation flowed, I realized how much we'd already opened up to each other. I told him about my marriage, how it had faded over the years, how it felt like my husband and I had simply grown into two strangers cohabiting the same space. He listened intently, not with pity but with understanding, something I wasn't used to. It felt good to share those parts of me that I had buried for so long. Nick, in turn, talked about his life, his hopes, his struggles, and the future he wanted to build. I found myself genuinely interested, not just in the surface details, but in the way his mind worked, the way he approached the world. There was an intensity to him that was refreshing and intoxicating. Somehow, during the course of our conversation, the space between us closed. I don't know when it happened, Whether it was the way he leaned in slightly when he spoke, or how his hand brushed against mine when he reached for his glass, but the air felt different. More charged. More intimate. I couldn't deny it anymore. This connection between us was undeniable, palpable even. I felt the pull between us, and it wasn't just about the attraction. It was deeper than that. It was the way he made me feel seen, like I was important again, like I mattered. It had been so long since I felt that. The moment happened so naturally that it took me by surprise. 1 minute we were talking, and the next he was leaning in, his breath warm against my skin, his lips brushing against mine. It wasn't a passionate kiss, at least, not in the way I had imagined passion before. It was soft, hesitant, as if we were both unsure but compelled by something we couldn't control. His lips lingered on mine for a moment longer than I expected, and then, almost as if he were testing my reaction, he pulled back slightly, his eyes searching mine. We didn't say anything for a long time. The silence was thick with the weight of what had just happened, and I could feel my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't regret it, not in the slightest. But I also knew that things couldn't go back to how they were before. That one kiss had shifted something between us, and the course of our relationship had irrevocably changed. Nick looked at me, a slight smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I didn't expect that," he said softly. His words were simple, but they held a weight that I felt deep in my chest. Neither of us made a move to pull away, but the silence between us now felt different, filled with a mix of anticipation and uncertainty. I was terrified, but I was also exhilarated. For the first time in years, I felt alive. It wasn't just about the kiss. It was about everything that had led up to it. The way he made me feel. The way he had broken through the walls I had so carefully built around myself. Question for readers: do you think one moment can change the entire course of a relationship, even when both people are hesitant to take the first step? Can something so small have such a big impact on the rest of your life? What do you think it means when two people are drawn together in such an unexpected way? After Nick left that evening, I sat on the couch, staring at the empty space where he had just been. My thoughts were scattered, a whirlwind of emotions and questions I couldn't seem to quiet. What had just happened? How had a simple conversation escalated into something so profound? And what did this mean for me, for my life, for everything I had known? I thought about my marriage, about my husband, Robert. Robert and I had been together for nearly 30 years. We had raised children together, built a life together, and somewhere along the way, we'd lost each other. We still lived in the same house, shared the same space, but I realized that I hadn't truly seen him in years. The years had softened our passion, dulled the sharp edges of our connection, until we were merely two people coexisting out of habit. Then came Nick, a reminder that I was still capable of feeling, of desiring, of being seen as something other than just a wife or a mother. It was disorienting, almost overwhelming. Could I really entertain the idea of being with someone so much younger? What would that say about me? About him? But there was something undeniable between us, something that went beyond age or societal expectations. Nick made me feel alive, not just in the sense of physical attraction, but emotionally, mentally. He had a fire in him that reminded me of who I used to be, who I still could be. I had spent so many years trying to fit into a mold, trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect friend, that I had forgotten to be the woman I wanted to be. I knew the world would judge me. People always had something to say about women in relationships with younger men. It wasn't a normal thing, not in the eyes of society. I'd heard the whispers, the assumptions, the cruel comments that often accompanied such relationships. But Nick didn't care about any of that. He didn't see me as a woman of a certain age. He saw me as someone he wanted to be with, as someone who made him laugh, made him think, made him feel something he couldn't quite put into words. Wasn't that what love was supposed to be about, after all? Feeling, connecting, sharing something real with another person, no matter what the outside world might think. The truth was, I didn't have any answers. I didn't know where this was going, or if it was even something I could allow myself to explore. But I knew that I couldn't ignore the pull I felt toward Nick, nor could I deny how much he had opened my heart to possibilities I hadn't considered in years. And yet, there was fear too. Fear of losing control, of being judged, of ruining everything. Could I really let go of all the constraints I had placed on myself? Could I dare to embrace this new chapter, even if it didn't fit into the neat little box that I had spent so many years constructing? Nick had asked me once if I thought love had an expiration date. At the time, I had laughed it off, but now I wasn't so sure. Did love end when you reached a certain age? Did it fade once the years piled up and the wrinkles set in? Or was love something you could rediscover, even at 53? Even after all the years of living in the shadow of what you were supposed to be? I didn't know. But I knew one thing. With Nick, I felt like I was finally breaking free of all the shoulds that had governed my life. With him, I felt like I could be me again. Question for readers. Do you think love can truly exist beyond societal expectations? Or is there a limit to how much we should defy what's normal? What makes a love story valid? Is it the connection, the age, or something else entirely? Would you be willing to take a chance on love, even if it meant going against everything you've been taught? It's been a few weeks since Nick and I had that night together. A few weeks since I allowed myself to feel something real, something that didn't come with a baggage of expectations or responsibilities. The more time I spent with him, the more I realized that love wasn't confined to age or circumstance. It wasn't about the years between us, the difference in our life experiences. It was about the connection. The way we spoke, the way we made each other laugh, the way we could sit in silence and still feel completely understood. As I sit here now, reflecting on everything that's happened, I realize that this journey isn't just about Nick or even about me. It's about letting go of the old limitations I placed on myself. It's about understanding that love isn't something that expires once you reach a certain age, or once life becomes complicated. Love is something that can be found at any stage in any form. It's fluid, not rigid. It's a force that doesn't care about the number of candles on your birthday cake, but about the fire inside your heart. Nick never once made me feel like I was too old. He never looked at me with pity or judgment. He just saw me, the woman, the person I had forgotten about in the whirlwind of my life. He reminded me of how much life there is to live, no matter how many years you've accumulated. In his presence, I felt more alive than I ever did in the last decade with Robert, and that's not something I can ignore. The truth is, love doesn't come with an expiration date. The only expiration is the one we place on ourselves when we decide that we're too old, too tired, too set in our ways to explore what's out there. I'm not naive enough to believe that this will be without challenges. I know the world will have its opinions, its whispers, but I'm done living for others. I'm done pretending that what I should do matters more than what I feel. So where do we go from here? I don't know, but I do know this. I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid of the consequences, not afraid of what people will think. Nick and I have something special, something real. And maybe that's all that matters. Love at any age is still love, and it's worth fighting for. As I look out my window now, I see Nick walking across the lawn, the same smile on his face that I've come to adore. I'm no longer hiding, no longer second-guessing myself. I'm ready to step into this new chapter, to embrace whatever comes next. Because in the end, love is about living, and I'm ready to live.